What's going on, boys and girls? Welcome to the next episode of the Mighty Panel Van. Hopefully the last episode. We're going to take you through the new fuel system we're doing for this thing, courtesy of Raceworks. So a huge big thank you to Raceworks for that. And then hopefully you'll see this thing get tuned and we'll see what we can make with a decent fuel system. It's E85 and a new converter and all the rest of it. So we've got, obviously, the existing 044s that were already in the car are staying. They are going to feed our surge tank. We debated trying to swap them out for something else. It was going to be a bit, I don't know, I suppose you'd call it better suited, but it just got too complicated with everything else that's already been done to the car. It was just so much easier and simpler to leave them in there. It was just going to be so much more simple for the whole setup. So we left them in there. We've converted the feed that used to just feed the engine, and that now feeds our new surge tank. And then obviously our surge tank is then integrated to return back to the tank, plus a return from the engine goes to the surge tank. So we've got two new Walbro or TI Automotive, as they're called, 525 litres per hour in-tank pumps in the surge, also courtesy of Raceworks. So shout out to our boys there at Raceworks, huge big thanks to them. So this is the bracket that we've made just behind the trans cooler to house the surge tank. So it's one of Raceworks' dual hanger surge tanks, so we can put both pumps inside the surge tank, and our twin 525s are going to be more than enough fuel feed for this thing for what we want to do on an E85. So that little bracket just sits up there behind the trans cooler out of the way. We wanted to try and leave this side clear because this thing is pretty ridiculously loud. It's a fairly new combo, it's a fairly new finished car. They haven't really had time to drive it yet. Brock, the owner, we've got a feeling that he's probably gonna want to / have to put a muffler on this car if he wants to get left alone by the boys in blue. It's freaking loud, and with it being bagged, there's not really any way to run the exhaust all the way out the back. You know, if you put it underneath the diff, well, then you're gonna have issues when you raise it on the back. So if you try and go up over the diff, well, then you're gonna squish it when you bag it. So even if the exhaust gets modified, it's probably gonna have to dump at the diff. It's the only way to leave clearance with this thing being on bags. And being that if you wanted to modify it, you'd have to dump it at the diff anyway, the only place that you could put a muffler is right here. So although it might seem like a bit of a weird spot to put the surge tank right behind the trans cooler, it was trying to foresee future issues with them probably wanting to put a muffler right here in this big void, which was left perfect for a surge tank, but we didn't utilize for that reason. So the boys are just finishing plumbing up the fuel system now because the bracket's made and the tank's mounted, which is all happy days. And then we've got to wire up the fuel pumps, obviously. So one of the 525s will share the trigger from the ECU with the two 044s that are already existing. So one 525 will be always running all the time. The other 525 we're going to have staged, so it's going to come on at a certain pressure, RPM, etc. So the stage pump, we're going to have to trigger from a DPO in the ECU. However, this car, all the DPOs are already taken up, so we're going to have to free one up to be able to trigger that second fuel pump. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the smart charge alternator system, which is controlled by the ECU through a DPO. We're just going to put a Gen 3 alternator on this thing, so it's just the same way we do most conversions when we do LS conversions in cars. Just put a Gen 3 alternator on it, that way it just works like a regular alternator. There's no smart charge variable, anything, and you don't need to use a DPO to control it. So that way we'll free up a DPO to use for our stage pump, and it'll all be happy days. So that's the plan. Got to order a new alternator and get this thing plumbed up. So hopefully not too long before we see this thing back on the dyno for some tune, boys. Rightio guys, so here we are, we're on the dyno. We had a few issues going to the Gen 3 alternator, and we realised that we do need a resistor to actually get it to work properly. So we thought while we wait for the resistor to get here, we've got it hooked up to our battery stabilizer at the moment. And we thought we'll just get the run-in done on the 98. It's still got assembly lube in the engine, so we need to flush that out. We need to get a few heat cycles in, just see how it goes. And then we'll get it off the dyno. We'll do some fluid changes, drop the oil, do a filter, etc. Cut it open, make sure we're all sweet, make sure our Torrington bearing's working the goods. And then obviously we'll get it back on the dyno with fresh oil, without assembly lube in the oil, and get the E85 happening and really get this thing cooking. So the other thing we're thinking at the moment, the gate springs in this are about 7 PSI, 6 or 7 pound. So if we want to make the numbers we want to make on the E85 the way that the boost control's plumbed, we probably need to go to a heavier gate spring. So at this stage we're thinking about changing gate spring as well while we do our service and everything else, so that we can, you know, make sure we can get to the boost levels we want to get to without having to change the wastegate plumbing and the boost control plumbing and that sort of thing. So yeah, just basically a run-in, make sure everything's sweet. Fuel system's working bloody awesome, so huge big thanks to our guys there at Raceworks for supplying all the fuel system and making all that happen for us. Yeah, huge thank you to them guys, can't thank them enough. So awesome stuff so far, just running it back up. Obviously the 98 tune is mostly already done from when Rex took it down to Hoffs and did it on the hub dyno, so it's really just a touch up of the 98 tune, but at least there's a little bit more time here, it's not so rushed. We're on our own equipment in our own time. Rex can actually get the tune a little bit cleaned up, whereas obviously down on the hubs at Hoffs Rex was on his own, it was a bit hard. There was stuff going on all over the place with obviously, and you know, it just was a bit hard. At least here we can clean it up a bit. So that's the idea at the moment. So already even back at 11 pound, 694. So just about 700 wheel horsepower at 11 pound. So you know, this thing's an animal. The setup is awesome. It just wants to hammer. This new converter's working awesome. As you can see, just freaking, the whole thing is just much better. It's much happier, this converter. Yeah, it's happy days, so looking good. So the fact that we're going 700 nearly wheel at 11 pound on 98 means that, you know, on the E we should be looking pretty comfortable to do what we want to do. And it's hooking up really well as well. It's hooking up really well in the dyno. It's not getting any, as you can see, normally with cars we have issues hooking up and stuff. There's waviness, you get wavy power curves and stuff when they rock up on the rollers and stuff. This thing's just biting and hooking up. So it's doing that at 700, hopefully another 300 wheel, and it's still hooking up. We'll see. We will find out. Anyway, basically that's where we're at with it. A couple of runs and yeah, do a quick service, flush it out, and get it back on there on some spicy juice. Alright guys, so that is pretty much a wrap for the day. Achieved what we set out to achieve, got a few heat cycles in, got this thing, the 98 tune, pretty well cleaned up. Found a few issues we're going to need to sort out. One of them being the little rubber flap on the inner guard of this hot side that runs down. Anyone who knows H-series Holdens knows there's a little rubber flap there that runs down over the A-arm. It can pretty much go because all it's doing is holding heat in. Doesn't really need to be there, but it's getting pretty hot and pretty unhappy. The other thing, Rex was just saying that the ECU is having a crack up about the internal ECU temperature, and the ECU is mounted on the firewall basically immediately behind the dump pipe. So the owner might have to sort something out about that, about moving that ECU or creating some sort of heat protection or nice ventilation for it to try and keep it cool. But yeah, a little bit more boost, a little bit more timing. The thing is, it's a really good combo. This converter's working so well. The combo is awesome. It's loving timing. This is the 1287, guys. I don't know if you remember way back from when we originally built this engine, but this is the 1287 cam. It's the same cam we use in all of our cam packages for rectangle port LSs, even aspirated ones. All of the VEs, VFs, pretty much all the ones you see that we do converters, we will use this cam. Obviously, if we're not doing converters, we'll use a slightly smaller cam, but this is our go-to cam for rectangle port heads. We found it to be sort of the biggest one you can go before you start seeing diminishing returns. Much bigger, you start seeing diminishing returns, and then you have to start worrying about fly cutting pistons, etc., etc. And I always have people talking to us about what cam they want. You know, they want to go boost in future, what we would put in it. This freaking cam. And this combo is a great example of how well this cam goes with boost, particularly as long as you have a nice, big, free-flowing hot side. So this thing is just loving timing. It is eating timing, not showing a hint of knock. It's just, yeah, it's doing so well. It's exactly what it should have been doing the first time on the hubs. Obviously, just it wasn't really doing it because of the way the converter was flaring and then ballooning and then eating the thrust bearing. We're just not doing it anymore. But we're starting to get a little bit of wheel spin. So as we move on with this tune, particularly once we go into E85, we're going to have some pretty big gaps between runs just to let the tires cool down and stuff like that. Because as you can see from these squiggly lines, we are starting to get a little bit of wheel spin and a few dramas there.
What's funny is that green line was, when it first happened, tightened it up. Then we had the pink line. Then
after a bit of a cool down.
Yeah, pink line with a bit more of a cool down. Then let it cool down again, but with a bit of extra timing that last run. But look, it's done the same. It's almost exactly the same.
Yeah, almost the same, but
just a bit higher.
The cool down between green and pink was quite a lot longer than the cool down between pink and blue. But
yeah, but you can feel them like they're so hot.
Yeah, they're
really hot.
They're struggling, which you'd expect at this sort of power and torque on this dyno on tires. But 795 at around 16 psi boost is an awesome result.
More
so
spring.
It needs that second fuel pump. That second fuel pump is getting us to there, even on 98, but still, to be basically at 800 wheel on the 98 is awesome. It's an awesome start. I really think that on the 85, this thing is just going to love life. It's just going to eat up timing. I really think I'm going to be able to crack that ton. And then, obviously, wind it all down a little bit. We would like to get the number. Us and the owner would really like to get that number on the dyno, but he doesn't really have any reason or need to have it turned up that high. It's a new build. Well, it's not a new build, but it's only just been turboed. It's only just had this much power. The gearbox is not rated for that much power. The gearbox, I think, is rated for 800. And he's obviously, being a fairly fresh combo, he does need to do a lot of development to the car. He needs to get it to the track. We need to start developing traction control, the rear end setup, getting this thing to track straight. There's a lot of development still has to go into the car before it needs to be making that sort of power. So we'll get the number, turn it down, get it to the track, get some track tuning done, get this thing developed to the point where it's actually running at its potential. And then we know that it's already tuned. It's just a matter after that of just turning the boost up. But for now, it'll go back down. But I really don't think we're going to have a trouble looking at those results at getting that number on the E85. So anyway, yeah, a few things to sort out. Extra gate springs. Remove this rubber flap, do an oil change, check this filter. And yeah, hit this thing again, and we're just going to have to pretty much have some decent cool down sessions between runs to let these tires stay reasonably cool and hopefully hook up as best we can. But yeah, happy days.
It's not bad. 800 on 98. Not done yet.
Yeehaw. Yeah, we'll probably
should be 800.
We've still got a little bit more that we'll do on the 98. Just that obviously it's late enough at the moment, but by the time we let the tires cool down, it's got to be probably after hours that we should be operating, particularly a car this freaking loud. The camera might not do it justice, but this thing is insanely loud.
So it's saying like you're going to have to put a muffler in if he's going to straight it.
I think he's going to thank us very much for where we put that fuel system and left all that room for that muffler, because my lord, it's going to need it for street training, for just street driving. But yeah, with a bit more work, not so much wheel spin, with the tyres a bit cooler, a little bit more timing, maybe a little bit more boost. At the moment, we're pretty much out of duty cycle, so this 16 pounds about all we're going to do with that spring, which is why we need an extra spring. So even with the extra spring, we can go a little bit further on the 98, which should get us well into 800.
Well, that's about it, because like it was 6 on gate, so like 6 to 16's nearly 3 times. So.
Yeah, that's about all you get with the way it's plumbed. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if we can get a little bit more boost in this with the gate change on the 98, we should go well into 800s on 98, and then yeah, on the E85, it should just eat it up. The way it's eating timing on 98, it's going to be freaking wicked. So awesome combo all round. Really happy with the combo. As you guys saw from the build of the engine, the whole idea was to build, you know, the cheapest bulletproof combo for making 1,000 horsepower that we could, and I think we've definitely achieved that. I think we will find that once we start approaching that 1,000 wheel on the E85, we're probably going to start looking at issues with lifting heads and stuff anyway. You probably go a bit further, but you know, inherently once you start over that 1,200 horsepower area, that's where your 4-bolt heads really start to become just a problem as they are. So anyway, for a nice, cheap, all-round, real budget setup, this thing is doing exactly what it should be doing. All right, guys, this car is the gift that keeps on giving. So we thought we were doing pretty well. As we just talked about, thought we were going to be going for 800 tomorrow on the 98 and then dancing on the 85. But I was just doing a little bit of a segment for the TikTok video. Rex noticed there's a few things on the ground. Started having a poke around, and this is what we found. So this is a weight off a flex plate, an unused hole that goes on your flex plate.
Look how good that weld is.
See how good the welds are. So this, I don't want to actually probably say the brand of this on camera right now for this video, the sake of this video, but it was not a cheap flex plate. It wasn't supplied by us. We sent the engine down, and he actually had to buy a new flex plate specifically for the engine because it's an LSA crank. It's an 8-bolt crank, not a 6.
It's a very good quality one.
So
that was important.
Yeah, it was important that it was a good SFI flex plate because of what he wants to do with the car. So I'm not going to name the company at the moment until we talk to someone about it, because that's not what we're about, but was not a cheap, was not a cheap flex plate. So what's happened is it's thrown a weight, and those other little bits were pieces of bell housing from the gearbox. So here we are, here now. Don't know how well you can see down there, but you can see the red, which is our converter. So that's not what you want to be able to see through a Turbo 400 gearbox housing or gearbox bell housing. Not to mention that Turbo 400s, the bell housing is part of the casting. So to replace the bell housing is actually, you've got to cut the old bell housing off and buy an SFI one that bolts on. But so yeah, that's pretty uncool. We were trying to have this thing ready for Street Machine Drag Challenge. Or Drag Week, whatever, Australian Drag Challenge and Street Machine down Victoria and the Bend and wherever else to go, I don't know, which is at the start of next month. So it may be another deadline that this thing doesn't get to, because there's no way they'll scrutineer the car with that, and there's no way it should probably be loaded up and run like that. So awesome. Another thing, this freaking car. Here we go again. How frustrating. Anyway, guys, there's no point in lamenting on this at the moment until we start talking to a few more people, but obviously it's not our fault. But we'll have to talk to the owner, because we didn't supply the flex plate. We'll have to talk to the owner about where it was purchased from. I imagine that it definitely should be warranted, given the brand that the flex plate is and the fact that it's SFI rated, and that definitely should not happen. So I assume that they will warrant the warranty, which is why we're not about sort of naming stuff at the moment. But looks like we're going to have to get this gearbox to someone to cut the bell housing off, put an SFI rated bell housing on this freaking gearbox and put it back together. So
when will this end?
Yeah, when will this car ever leave?
I mean, that's not even, no, not our fault, not the owner's fault. Like,
no, that's what I mean. It's not the owner's fault. It's not our fault. It's just another freaking thing that happens with cars.
Yeah, you buy a good, very expensive, good quality SFI rated flex plate, and then shit's flying off and putting holes in your gearbox. So, boy.
Oh well, I guess I'll call the owner and give him the great news.
It's making really good power. But
yeah, I've got good news and bad news, guy. We've got making heaps of power on 98, but so much power that it's punched a hole in your gearbox bell housing.